It started with whispers in the corridors of the Galactic Institute of Unified Intelligence, GIUI for short, a place where hundreds of alien species mingled, studied, debated, and occasionally laughed behind closed doors at the same unspoken joke. Humans weren't allowed here anymore. 5 years ago, Earth had been banned from sending any further representatives. The official reason? Instability and aggression inconsistent with the cooperative vision of the Institute. Unofficially, everyone knew it was because the humans didn't play by the same fragile rules the rest of the galaxy worshipped, like scripture. They argued too loud, solved problems too fast, fought too hard, didn't respect hierarchy. And worst of all, they won too often. Now, all that remained of humanity at GIUI were a few archival records, some censored documents, and a single out-of-place item in the xenobiology section of the database labeled Terran Cognition, Behavioral Abnormalities and Combat Pathology. It was in this environment that the mocking began, not by the professors, though their silence allowed it, but by a trio of alien students from the elite caste of the Velkari, known across systems for their vast intellect and cutting disdain. Today's lecture was supposed to be about cross-species cognitive development, but it turned into something else the moment Professor Hallen stepped out of the chamber. "That's how the Terran tried to explain quantum reaction reflex," sneered Drolis, the tallest of the three, flexing his bioluminescent spines like it made him smarter. He literally said, and I quote, "Just punch it hard enough and the math works out?" They all burst into laughter, even the quieter one, Tane, who usually hung back. Their laughter echoed down the chrome walls of the hall, triggering a few awkward glances from other species passing by. Species who remembered what the humans had done in their short time at GIUI, and after. "But remember," snorted Yarak, a slug-shaped thing oozing superiority. "They still tried to hack the AI grading system to give themselves A+ scores. I mean, come on, that's not intelligence, that's desperation. They couldn't handle being average." Drolis leaned back, his mocking voice shifting to an exaggerated growl. "We are humans. We fight and cry and whine and build nukes out of spite. Roar!" More laughter, until a voice interrupted them. "That footage," someone muttered from the side hall, almost casually. "You seen it?" The group turned. A shadowed figure stood there, short, cloaked in an old Earth-style coat, face unreadable. His ID tag just read, "Research Intern, Clearance Restricted." Drolis narrowed his eyes. "Footage." The figure tilted his head. "From the Nabari incident. The one sealed in Class 5 archives. But you guys are so smart, right? Maybe you can explain why 3 Terrans walked into a war zone with no backup, no approval, and walked out with 7 delegates from 6 species, including 1 Velkari, alive." Yarak blinked. "That's propaganda. No one has ever—" "It's not propaganda," the intern replied coldly. "It's footage, real, unedited, from the helmet of Captain Lorne, human, banned, forgotten." Tane frowned. "Why would we care? Some illegal savior complex garbage? Emotional overload and blind risk-taking?" The intern stepped forward. "Because you're going to see it tomorrow. They've declassified it. Mandatory viewing. Galactic Truth Initiative passed the vote this morning." For a second, none of the Velkari spoke. Then Drolis tried to brush it off with a sneer. "Let me guess. Screaming, bullets, and more screaming? What are we supposed to do? Clap?" The intern's face didn't change, but his voice lowered to something rough. "Number, you'll be too busy trying not to vomit." And then he walked away. Later that night, in a private network, Drolis, Yarak, and Toyne accessed the restricted stream early through a bypass tool they weren't supposed to have. The footage began with static, then breathing, gunfire, screams, and then a human voice, gravelly, tired, angry. They ambushed the convoy. 7 delegates, no way out, no one's coming. So we go in. Quiet, brutal, efficient. They watched what happened next in silence. Not because they were impressed, but because they couldn't look away. Humanity hadn't just fought. They became monsters to save the ones calling them monsters, and they did it without permission. The viewing chamber was quiet, not the kind of silence born from boredom or respect. This was the sound of disbelief. Dozens of students from different systems, species that prided themselves on advanced logic and refined emotional control, now sat as still as statues. Drolis didn't move. His mandibles twitched. His eyes had gone dull, wide, uncertain. Even the chemical shimmer that normally danced across his skin had faded. Tain sat beside him, breathing in shallow gulps like his body was fighting itself. Yarak had retreated into the back of his seat shell, silent and motionless. They weren't alone in their shock. On screen, the final scene looped one more time. The human, soaked in blood that wasn't all his, dragging a screaming Velkari delegate out of the wreckage. One arm shattered, bones visible, a grenade pin clenched between his teeth. He had no words left, just actions. And then came the final quote. Voiceover from the tribunal hearing after the event. The human captain, Lorne, standing tall before the council. You abandoned them. We didn't. And if that offends your pride more than it shames your soul, you were never worthy of leadership. The screen faded to black. The lights in the room returned with a slow hum. No one spoke. Not even the professors. They'd seen the truth. The kind of truth that didn't give space for interpretation or sanitized politics. They saw 3 humans, alone, weaponless, uninvited, walk into a hellhole created by bureaucratic cowardice, and walk out with the lives others were too afraid to risk saving. It was raw, it was ugly, and it was unmistakably human. Professor Hallen finally broke the silence. His voice was quieter than usual, almost hesitant. You've now seen the declassified Nabari footage. This concludes the mandatory Truth Initiative review. Please, reflect appropriately. Class dismissed. Nobody moved. Nobody could. After a long pause, Drolis rose. His legs wobbled, his posture crooked. He was still the tall, proud Velkari, but something in his frame had cracked. He didn't speak to Yarak or Tain. He just stumbled, out of the chamber like a soldier who'd finally realized the war he trained for was never real, and the real war had already broken him. Outside, the Institute's halls buzzed with something new. Quiet shame. Not loud guilt. Aliens weren't great with humility, but a shifting current of something harder to name. Old jokes about humans were no longer being whispered. A few were even being deleted from public channels and group archives. Memes mocking Terran aggression? Gone. Disrespectful AI bots quoting human rage quirks? Silenced overnight. In the corner of the lounge, Tain and Yarak sat in silence. Yarak finally spoke. I watched it again. Tain glanced up. Why? I don't know, Yarak murmured. I thought if I saw it again, maybe it wouldn't feel so wrong, like I'd see the trick, the manipulation, but I didn't. Tain's jaw tightened. We made fun of them. We all did, Yarak replied. It was easy. No one argued when they got banned. We all agreed. Too volatile. Too undisciplined. Too human. Tain ran a hand across his ridged brow. But they were the only ones who didn't hesitate. That scene where Lorne dragged the Texar out of the burning tank, he took shrapnel to the spine. The others told him to leave the body. He didn't even pause. Yarak whispered, and the Texar was one of the species who voted for their banishment. A long silence passed. Then Yurak said something he had never dared to before. "I don't think we understand them. At all." Meanwhile, deep in one of the Institute's archives, a hidden access point opened. The intern, the one who had warned them, leaned back in his chair and watched the access logs pour in. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Students, faculty, even staff from other departments were watching the footage now. Some even pulled older files, unredacted interviews, mission logs, combat recordings, trial footage. He closed his eyes for a second. His name wasn't on the Institute registry. In fact, there was no real intern with clearance that high. But he hadn't lied. He had seen the footage. He was human. They had no idea how many of them were still watching from the shadows. Elsewhere, in a less formal chamber, somewhere between a cafe and a student debate center, Drolis sat alone. He hadn't eaten. His eyes were sunken. Around him, other students occasionally passed by and gave him a look he'd never experienced before. Not respect, not fear. Something closer to embarrassment. He was one of the loudest mockers. And now he was the fool. Then a small voice approached. "You were wrong." Drolis looked up slowly. It was a Ziran, small, soft-spoken species, usually terrified of confrontation. She stood with a firm stance now, eyes locked onto his. "You made jokes. You called them savages, but you weren't the one bleeding in that tunnel. They were." Drolis tried to defend himself, to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She leaned closer. "My uncle was one of the delegates. He owed his life to that savage, and you laughed at his pain." Then she walked away. For the first time in his life, Drolis didn't feel superior. He felt small. A few days later, the Institute made another announcement. A new elective was being opened. Terran Psychology and Battlefield Ethics. Voluntary for now, controversial. But the line of students signing up stretched out the door. Tain and Yarak were both among them. When asked why, Tain gave a simple answer. "They did what we couldn't, and I need to know why." The intern watched from a distance again, eyes unreadable. He pulled out an old Terran dog tag from his pocket and stared at the name. Lorne. Back on Earth, in a quiet underground outpost covered in satellite-disrupting dust and signal jammers, Lorne sat alone in a chair built for pain. The kind of chair only someone who lived through real war would ever feel comfortable in. He was older now. Gray-bearded, hollow-eyed, skin stretched over old scars. A younger man approached him. "Sir, they finally released it." Lorne looked up slowly. "They saw it?" "Yes." Lorne stared off into the distance for a long time. "I didn't save them for recognition," he muttered. "Didn't save them for guilt or pride or politics. I did it because no one else would. Simple as that." The younger man paused. "Some of them are apologizing." Lorne chuckled dryly. "Too late for that. But maybe not too late for them." He stood slowly, spine cracking like dead wood. "Prepare the others. They're going to come looking." "For what?" Lorne's voice was flat. "For more truth." The students didn't fully understand it yet, but something had shifted in the galactic order. Humanity wasn't extinct. They weren't forgotten. They were remembered through footage soaked in truth and blood and rage and mercy. Not the kind of mercy that asked for applause, but the kind that crawled through fire with a body over one shoulder and a loaded pistol in the other hand. And soon, the Institute would face the hardest question of all. What if banning humanity was their greatest mistake? Because monsters might be terrifying. But what if the monsters were also heroes? Within a week, the Galactic Institute didn't feel like itself anymore. The atmosphere, once filled with pompous lectures, smug debates, and condescending alien banter, had turned cold. No one cracked jokes about humans anymore. The word Terran wasn't followed by scoffs or memes. It was whispered now, like something forbidden or dangerous. The new elective course, Terran Psychology and Battlefield Ethics, was initially brushed off by the higher staff as an experimental offering, a gesture, a temporary fluke. Then the enrollments exploded. By the second cycle, 300 students had registered, more than any elective in institute history. By the third cycle, students were being waitlisted. That was when the administration started to panic. Behind closed doors, an emergency faculty summit was called. "We are witnessing a coordinated shift in student behavior," Professor Halland said, pacing before a ring of elder scholars and AI overseers. "There's a growing fascination, no, obsession, with human methodology. This is dangerous." A green-skinned Androvian scoffed. "What's dangerous is how easily we allowed that footage to be distributed. It never should have been declassified. It was a mistake." Another voice cut through. Sharp, calculated. "It wasn't a mistake." All heads turned. Dean Cathor, one of the original founders of the Institute, stood at the edge of the chamber. His robes were heavier than usual. His face, a patchwork of cybernetic implants and old burn scars, bore the weight of centuries of war and wisdom. He'd survived 5 planetary revolutions. Some whispered he had even fought beside humans once, long ago, before the ban. "You are all afraid," Cathor said, "and you should be, because that footage didn't glorify humanity. It reminded us how pathetic we've become." Gasps rippled through the room. "Look at our students now," he continued. "They're not interested in human culture or language or Terran history. They're dissecting their rage, their loyalty, their ruthlessness. They're studying human choice under pressure." One professor objected. "They're monsters." "No," Cathor cut in, voice like iron. "We are cowards." Silence. And no one had the guts to argue. Meanwhile, down in the lower levels of the Institute, an area previously reserved for outdated archives, the so-called Terran class was in session. Tane sat near the front, Yarak beside him. Even Drolis had shown up again, this time without a shred of his old arrogance. The class wasn't like the others. There were no holoscreens, no robotic aids. Just a black console with physical keys and a dusty monitor, like the kind humans had once used. The lecturer was not a professor. He didn't have a title or a name anyone could pronounce. He was the intern. Except now everyone knew he wasn't just an intern. He was one of them. A human. His eyes scanned the room. Dead calm. No smile, no warm greeting. Just his voice, coarse and clear. Today's lesson: the fall of Delta 9 and the doctrine of sacrifice. He tapped the console. A low-resolution video began to play. It showed human soldiers hunkered down in a collapsed structure, surrounded, bleeding, one of them already missing half a leg. Their communication lines were down. The rescue fleet was 3 hours out. And yet none of them panicked. The human commanding officer gave a single order. "We hold." Not for us. For the civvies upstairs. They fought for 6 hours, ran out of ammunition, switched to knives and improvised traps. When the rescue finally arrived, 12 civilians were alive, and every soldier was dead. The footage stopped. The human speaker leaned forward. Question 1. Why didn't they retreat? A student in the back answered, uncertainly. Because of orders? Wrong, he said flatly. The order was to evacuate. The commander chose to hold. Drolis raised a shaky hand. Why? The man's voice turned colder. because they'd rather die standing between hell and the innocent than live with the shame of running. That hit hard. No one spoke for a long time. Then Yurak muttered under his breath, "We would have evacuated. Every species here would have. We'd have justified it later with logic." "Exactly," the human said. "That's why you lost respect for yourselves, and why you fear us." Later that night, a private message went viral. Anonymous, heavily encrypted, likely routed through 5 black market relays. But the content was simple. An image. A blood-soaked Terran dragging a soldier on his back. Captioned, "Banned, but not forgotten." By morning, Institute social networks were flooded with debates, reposts, secret discussion groups. A growing number of students began wearing old Terran military insignias. A quiet movement was forming, and it terrified the old guard. They tried to shut it down. They failed. Back in the High Assembly, Cathor addressed the gathered senators of the Galactic Union. "Whether you like it or not," he said, "the myth of Terran irrelevance is dead. You can silence the footage, you can lock the archives, but the minds of our students are already infected. Not with propaganda, but respect." One senator growled, "What are you suggesting? That we invite them back?" Cathor's smile was bitter. "I'm suggesting we no longer have a choice." On Earth, deep beneath the ashes of abandoned cities and scrubbed records, Lorne and his people were watching. Every ping, every data trace, every forum and encrypted stream coming out of the Institute was being logged and monitored. "They're turning," his lieutenant said. Lorne nodded. "Not enough yet, but they will." Another voice entered the room, gruffer and meaner. A younger human, arms crossed, eyes fierce. "Let me go up there," he growled. "Let them see what a real Terran looks like, not filtered through a screen, not dressed up in history. Let me show them." Lorne glanced at him, then back at the streams. "Soon," he said. "Not yet. Right now they need to doubt their leaders, to question their truth. But when the time comes—" He looked up, eyes steeled. "We don't go to be accepted. We go to remind them why they needed us in the first place." Back at the Institute, the administration made one final desperate move. They suspended the elective. Students rioted. Not violently, not yet, but loud enough to send a message. Petitions were filed, faculty were confronted. Footage was leaked of meetings where professors openly admitted to fearing human ideology. It was chaos. Tane stood on the steps of the East Dome with a makeshift sign around his neck. "I'd rather learn from the monsters who saved lives than the cowards who abandoned them." Thousands joined him. The message was spreading. And then, it happened. The holographic sky above the Institute, normally reserved for peaceful projections of unity and order, flickered. A new message appeared, untraceable, unstoppable. A single phrase. "We never needed your approval, only your honesty." Underneath it, the Terran emblem. Not long after, a transmission burst through the defense satellites over the Institute's sector, unmarked, undetected until it was too late to intercept. Lorne's voice, unfiltered, calm, cold. "You banned us, called us dangerous, unstable, primitive. But when the fires came, when your structures collapsed, when your rules failed, we were the ones who ran toward the screams. We didn't do it for forgiveness. We did it because we are human. And we don't wait for permission to do what's right." If that scares you, then maybe the problem wasn't us. The screen went black. And just like that, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The days following the unauthorized transmission from Earth were chaos. Security AIs scrambled to trace the signal's origin, but it was like chasing shadows in a black hole. Every trace led to a dead path. Every timestamp contradicted the next. And by the time they managed to isolate a pattern, it was too late. The message had already gone viral across over 400 systems. Some called it a threat, some called it prophecy. But to the younger generation in the Institute, it felt like something else entirely. Truth. Drolis stood in front of his dorm mirror, unable to meet his own eyes. His spines no longer glowed. They'd dulled, a biological reflection of shame. He remembered the first time he laughed at a Terran's combat footage. He remembered how he mocked their desperation, how he called them a species that bleeds more than it thinks. Now, he could still see the face of that human from the Nabari footage. The man didn't shout slogans or beg for approval. He bled, he endured. He saved lives that had spat on his existence. And Drolis couldn't stop thinking, would I have done the same? He knew the answer. Worse, so did everyone else. The halls of the Galactic Institute no longer echoed with debate. They throbbed with unrest. Dozens of student groups had formed overnight. They called themselves names like the Witnesses, True Archive, Legacy Holders, and most ominously, the Iron Debt. Their symbol? A cracked image of Earth, half burning, half shining. Tain and Yarak had joined Iron Debt. Not because they wanted war, but because they couldn't tolerate silence anymore. They met secretly in repurposed storage halls, learning human tactics, studying ancient Earth history, decoding battle ethics from centuries past. And for the first time since they arrived at the Institute, they felt purpose, not assigned, not permitted, chosen. The High Council tried to stop it. Dean Cathor, once silent, now stood openly opposed to the censorship orders being handed down. "We teach them to question," he barked during a recorded session. "But the moment they question us, we panic. What does that say about us?" One of the counselors slammed his fist. "This is how revolutions begin." Cathor didn't flinch. "Then maybe it's time we earned one." Inside the deepest archive of the Institute, hidden behind outdated shields and layers of bureaucratic forgetfulness, the intern sat again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Tain, Yarak, Drolis, and 15 others had followed a path of encrypted breadcrumbs he had deliberately left for them. They entered the chamber quietly, nervous, unsure what they were about to face. He turned to them, not with a smile, but with resolve. "I knew some of you would come," he said. Drolis stepped forward, voice low. "You're really one of them." The man nodded. "Name's Cole, Corporal, Earth's last Planetary Infantry Division. Retired, dishonorably." Yarak squinted. "Why dishonorably?" Cole cracked a small, bitter smile. "Because I disobeyed a non-intervention order. I saved people who weren't human. Council didn't like that." Tain stared. "So you were punished for doing what was right?" "That's the human way," Cole said. "We don't win because we're stronger. We win because we choose what others fear to face." He turned and pulled a cover off an old device. It was crude, metallic, worn. It bore an old symbol, a Terran wolf, fanged and scarred, staring down a collapsing star. "This," Cole said, "is the last unsealed command node from Earth's classified response protocol. It was meant to activate only if humanity was ever asked, begged, to return. It hasn't triggered yet. Not fully." Tain frowned. "Why not?" Cole turned to face them, voice dark and heavy. "Because the galaxy still hasn't asked. They're still pretending we're gone." Yarak asked carefully, "And if they do ask?" Cole's answer was like a blade through the air. "Then we don't come back as students. We come back as consequence." Up above, the council held its last session behind closed doors. The footage from Earth, the spread of human ideology, the unrest among the students. It was spiraling out of control. They voted on emergency lockdown measures, martial law inside Institute grounds, AI enforcement drones, speech restrictions. The vote passed. Barely. Cathor walked out before the final tally. He didn't say a word. That night he uploaded every archived footage of Terran sacrifice, conflict, and survival to a decentralized galactic net. He titled the file, "The Ones Who Walked Through Fire," and then he vanished. The enforcement started within hours. Drones scanned hallways. Flags of Earth were torn down. Discussion groups were broken apart. Human sympathizers were detained for questioning. Cole's location was flagged and marked for raid. But it was too late. The students had already scattered. The message had already seeded. And Earth was already listening. Down on the edge of the Sol system, Lorne stood before a quiet command chamber. Dozens of humans surrounded him. Veterans, engineers, tacticians, even war-scarred civilians. Every one of them had lost something. A technician approached. "Signal from GIUI system. Emergency lockout triggered. Resistance groups forming. Protocol Level 3 breached." Lorne nodded. "Begin Phase 1. A nearby officer looked up. "What's Phase 1? Lorne's voice came with the weight of unspoken vengeance. "Remind them that we were never gone." In the Institute, as lights flickered and lockdown orders were announced over the intercom, Cole gathered the small team inside the archive chamber. "You want out?" he asked. "Now's the time." No one moved. He nodded. "Then listen carefully. This place runs on rules, bureaucracy, status. We run on instinct, and they've never known how to deal with that." He opened a crate and pulled out an old weapon, not armed, just symbolic, a Terran combat knife, etched with the word unyielding. He looked each of them in the eye. "You've seen the footage. You know what we are, what we became. If you're going to stand with us, it's not just a rebellion, it's a declaration." Yurak's hand tightened into a fist. "A declaration of what?" Cole smirked. "Of return." The Institute was no longer a place of learning. It was now a pressure cooker, steam hissing through cracks the Council could no longer seal. Half the AI drones were refusing orders, repelled by logic loops after reviewing human behavioral models. Some professors were resigning, others were going into hiding. And somewhere, in the walls, among the ventilation shafts and maintenance grids, the message was spreading. They are coming back, not as conquerors, not as teachers, but as something far more dangerous to a brittle galaxy, as mirrors. Because what scared them most about humanity wasn't the weapons, wasn't the anger, wasn't even the blood. It was that somewhere, deep down, they saw themselves in us, and it made them ashamed. It started with a bang, not a metaphor. A real physical explosion in the North Tower of the Galactic Institute, shattering windows and collapsing 3 floors. No one died. Not this time. But it sent a message louder than any speech. We're done being silent. The administration claimed it was an accident, a reactor glitch. But those inside the Institute knew better. Rumors spread like wildfire. The Iron Debt had struck. Not to kill, to awaken. Tane crouched behind a shattered statue in the East Wing courtyard, eyes scanning for patrol drones. The sky was red with emergency lighting, and the normal hum of Institute security systems was drowned out by shouting, chanting, running. His chest pounded. This wasn't a protest anymore. It was war. He checked his wristcom, patched into Cole's encrypted channel. "Report," came Cole's voice, calm as steel. "East Wing secured. 73 students, no casualties. Yurak's unit is holding the south gate." Cole's reply was short. "Good. Keep the drones distracted. We go live in 15. "Live?" There was a pause. Then, "The stream." Elsewhere, Yurak ducked into cover behind a broken blast shield, 3 students at his side. He held a pulse jammer they'd rigged from scrap tech, an old Terran trick Cole taught them. He activated it and watched a patrol drone spiral out of the sky. The students cheered. But Yurak didn't smile. He stared up at the Institute walls, the same walls that once made him feel safe, prestigious, important. Now they looked like a cage, and he'd rather burn it down than stay caged another minute. In the command chamber, the administrators were in panic. "This is treason," a counselor barked. "We need military intervention, full wipeout." Professor Hallen looked around, stunned. "You're talking about executing students." "They're radicals now." "They're us. They were your students last week. They've been infected. You've seen what they're wearing. Human war sigils, rebellion tattoos, Earth insignia." The lead AI interface chimed in, glitching slightly as it calculated. 72% of Institute students have engaged in or supported anti-administration behavior since the declassification event. Halon whispered, "We've lost them." Another voice echoed from the corner of the room. "Cathor." "No," he said. "You never had them." The counselors turned to see him walking in through the emergency doors, dressed not in robes, but in old military gear, half ceremonial, half scarred by battle. "You taught them obedience," he said, stepping forward, "but the humans taught them purpose." Underground, Cole stood in a hidden studio surrounded by hardwired tech. No galactic stream, no central comms, just raw, patched-together systems like the old Earth resistance used to broadcast under planetary lockdowns. He looked into the lens. The red light blinked on, and the galaxy watched. "This is Corporal Elias Cole, Terran Infantry Division, dishonorably discharged, proudly defiant. You've seen our blood. You've watched us fall. You laughed when we were banned. But now you're watching your own institutions rot, and you're starting to understand why. We were never the threat. We were the reminder of what you once had and threw away. You wanted peace without cost, unity without confrontation, survival without sacrifice. We didn't. We fought. We bled. We buried our dead and kept walking. Now your students are waking up. They don't want safe lies anymore. They want something real. We're not coming back to ask. We're coming back because you need us, whether you like it or not." The message flooded every system, encrypted, unstoppable, mirrored through thousands of nodes planted by human sympathizers across the outer colonies. The reaction was instantaneous. Some systems went dark, blocking the stream. Others shared it again and again. But inside the Institute, it exploded like a virus through the halls. Students began chanting. Doors were smashed. Professors fled their offices. AI security bots glitched and crashed. And then the real shift happened. The non-human students, those from proud, ancient civilizations, began rallying behind Terran war cries. Not because they wanted to become human, but because, for once, they understood them. In the chaos, Drolis led a unit of once elitist Velkari, the same species that once ridiculed Terran emotional instability. Now they were carrying human riot shields and quoting Lorne's battlefield doctrine. One of his sub-commanders asked him, "Why do we follow their tactics?" Drolis answered, "Because their tactics don't care about pride. They care about victory." And for the first time in his life, he meant it. Back in the council chamber, everything fell apart. One of the drone commanders turned on the council. "I refuse further commands under Section 8 Protocol, Civil Disobedience Ethics Violation. This institution is no longer operating under lawful educational charter." Professor Hallen collapsed into his chair. "They've rewritten the system," he whispered. Cathor stood behind him, watching fire burn across the distant towers. "No," he said. "They reminded it of what it was always supposed to be." In the Southgate battle, Yurak took a hit to the shoulder. Nothing fatal, just a glancing stun round. He winced, bit down, and kept pushing forward. The pain was real, not simulated, not theoretical. And it felt like truth. His partner screamed, "Fall back!" Yurak looked at the advancing bots, then at the civilians hiding behind him. He grabbed a pipe, charged forward. That was humanity, not strategy, not logic, instinct. The students overran the AI core in just under an hour. The lockdown failed. The feed returned. And from the sky came the real turning point. Unmarked vessels. Silent. No IFF tags. No diplomatic codes. They didn't ask for permission. They just landed. And when the doors opened, Terrans walked out. Not diplomats, not soldiers, not conquerors. Just men and women in old armor, carrying history on their backs and determination in their eyes. Lorne stepped out first. Students ran toward them, some in awe, some in fear. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't preach. He just walked through the broken gates of the place that had once exiled his kind, with the calm of someone who never needed a second invitation. Cole met him at the central plaza. They nodded. No salute, no speech, just war-forged understanding. Yurak, Tain, Drolis, and the others gathered around, their faces bloody, dirty, exhausted, but proud. Lorne finally spoke. "You fought for this?" Tain nodded. "Not for power, for truth." Lorne smiled, just barely. "Then you already know what it means to be human." The Galactic Institute didn't collapse that day. It transformed. The old leadership resigned or vanished. The curriculum was overhauled. A new subject was added to the core educational system across the galaxy. Terran conflict ethics and moral adaptation. Optional? Number mandatory. Some species protested, some worlds rebelled, but deep down, everyone knew. The Terrans weren't back to rule. They were back to remind the galaxy of what it once valued. Honor without reward, courage without permission, and truth without apology. 2 weeks had passed since the humans returned. The Galactic Institute, once a symbol of scholarly peace and control, now looked more like a refugee outpost. Half of the towers were still in ruins. Holographic banners were ripped or burned. Drones hung useless from cracked ceilings. But despite the destruction, there was something new in the air. A pulse. A sense of life. Where once there were quiet, careful corridors filled with over-politeness and intellectual arrogance, now there were voices. Loud ones, young ones, students who had survived the rebellion walking shoulder to shoulder with the same Terrans they once mocked. Some in training, some still wounded, but all awake in a way they hadn't been before. Classes resumed, not with lectures, but with stories. 6 systems have blocked our feeds. 3 more are echoing falsified broadcasts. That's not coincidence. It's coordination. Lorne nodded. They're trying to turn fear into policy. Tain stood near the door, now wearing a modified Terran field jacket. Then we fight back. With what? Someone asked. We don't have an army. No, said Lorne. We don't. He stood, slowly, voice low and even. But we have something they don't. Everyone turned to him. He stared into the distance, fists clenched. We have regret, and regret makes people brave in ways loyalty never could. On the outskirts of Veltrax, in a chamber filled with dying light, a final plan was put into place. A fabricated video. Real footage. Spliced, edited, twisted. Lorne, shown firing on civilians. Cole, torturing prisoners. The words rearranged, the context destroyed. And the narrative? The humans aren't here to help. They're here to conquer what they couldn't earn. The clip was sent to every neutral system in the quadrant. It spread fast, but this time it didn't go unanswered. The archive defense fired back, not with denials, but with the full, unedited versions. The truth, the context, the aftermath, and students from a dozen systems added personal messages. I was there when Lorne saved 30 unarmed civilians. Cole carried my friend out of a burning hallway. If they're monsters, then I want to learn from monsters. The fight wasn't for land. It was for belief. And belief was beginning to turn. Yarak stood atop the rebuilt Institute Tower, staring into the sky. He knew the war wasn't over. He knew they'd lose friends. Maybe even Earth would fall again. But he also knew something else. They were no longer fighting for humanity. They were fighting for the right to be human, to be flawed, stubborn, loyal, dangerous, and unrelenting in the face of clean, sterile lies. And for that, he would bleed. They were betrayed by one of their own. It happened just after midnight, Earth time standard. While most of the Institute slept beneath the flickering reconstruction lights and patchwork dome systems, a signal burst out of the South Data Wing, encrypted, precise, untraceable except for one signature. Drolis. Not the old Drolis who mocked and sneered at Terrans in lecture halls, not the Drolis who bled beside Yarak and held the line at the North Gate. This was a version of him that no one saw coming, cornered, compromised, and bitter. He thought he was doing the right thing. He thought if he fed the old guard just enough, a backdoor code, the timing of the next archive defense stream, they'd stop the disinformation campaign. That they'd see compromise was still possible. That maybe, just maybe, the galaxy didn't need another war. He was wrong. Lorne woke before the breach alarms triggered. Call it instinct. Call it scars. The comm on his wrist lit up a second later. Cole's voice came through hard and fast. We've been hit. Data Core 3 is leaking. Satellite jammers are being overridden. It's internal. Lorne didn't speak. He was already moving. By the time he reached the Archive Defense Command Bay, 2 servers were already fried. Half the screens were dark. Their firewall AI was in shutdown loop, trying to reboot faster than it was being hijacked. Students were panicking. Yarak was shouting orders. Tain was trying to trace the signal source. Then the room froze. The emergency alert played across every screen, from the walls of the Institute to orbiting satellites and deep network star relays. A voice none of them recognized, female, cold, synthetic, echoed across the system. The Galactic Council, in cooperation with the Unified Security Protocol, hereby declares Earth and all affiliated actors a rogue, destabilizing force. Effective immediately, all Terran transmissions, teachings, and representatives are to be detained or eliminated under Article 19 of the Stability Accord. Peace must be preserved. Order must be restored. Then came the footage. The faked one. Lorne, restructured into a killer of innocence. Cole, distorted and filtered into a torturer. And a closing line in bold across the broadcast, "The disease has returned. This time we finish the cure." Chaos followed. The students, already radicalized, already awake, didn't fold. They didn't scatter. They doubled down. But the Institute's air changed. No longer a battlefield. Now, a siege. In the old biomech lab, Drolis stood frozen, datapad still glowing in his shaking hands. He'd been caught. Not by force, not by soldiers, but by shame. Yarak stood across the room, silent, not even holding a weapon. "You sold us out," he said. Drolis opened his mouth. No words came out. Only guilt. I thought I could negotiate, get ahead of it. I didn't know they'd use it to burn us." Tain stepped into the room behind Yarak. His face wasn't angry, just hollow. Cole sat cross-legged in the dirt with a group of students from 5 different species, explaining how a human squad once broke through an enemy line using nothing but mirrors, fire, and 2 pieces of broken glass. Tain watched from a distance. He'd healed from the battle, but something inside him hadn't quite returned to normal. He still couldn't sleep right. still jumped at loud noises. But the thing that hurt the most wasn't pain. It was clarity. The Terrans hadn't just opened their eyes. They'd shown them what it looked like when you stopped pretending everything was fine. In the shadows of the galaxy, not everyone saw these changes as progress. In a sealed chamber on the planet Veltrax, 3 high-ranking officials met under private cloaking fields. "This is a problem," one hissed. "The Institute was a control point. Now it's a symbol of Terran defiance." Another, a senator from the Rulkan Accord, leaned forward. "The humans didn't come back as diplomats. They came back as ghosts, and now they're building influence." The third, an old reptilian commander, growled, "We should have buried them when we had the chance." Banning them wasn't enough. They weren't alone. Across 17 sectors, private messages circulated between systems: admirals, politicians, corporate rulers, the old elite, those who'd benefited from a weak, neutered galaxy, one where questions were discouraged and truth was measured in approved syllables. To them, the humans weren't a warning. They were a contagion. And the plan began to form. On Earth, Lorne knew. He always knew it wouldn't end with one victory. The transmission feed from the Institute flickered briefly, a signal jammed for 0.3 seconds, just long enough to tell him the galaxy was stirring again. "They're regrouping," said Cole beside him. Lorne nodded, arms folded, staring at a live feed of the campus square, where a dozen species worked together to repair a broken monument, once a tribute to unity, now being rebuilt with a Terran blade fused into its core. "They won't attack outright," Lorne muttered. "They'll try to twist the narrative, turn fear into justification." Cole spat. "Figures, that's what they always did. Sanitize the truth until it's comfortable." Lorne turned away from the screen. "Then we give them a version they can't rewrite." Inside the Institute, Drolis walked the old Hall of Doctrine, now empty, except for dust and smashed plinths. He carried a single datapad under his arm, eyes narrowed. He wasn't a follower anymore, not even a student. He was something worse, someone who saw the lie and helped build it. When he reached the archive chamber, he found Yarak sitting in silence, watching an old human clip on loop. Lorne, younger, screaming into a battlefield radio, blood running down his face. "We're the only ones left. I don't care what your rulebook says. We fight, we hold, or we bury the galaxy under our failure." Yarak looked up. "He said that with no cameras, no witnesses. He thought no one would hear it." Drolis sat beside him. "That's how you know it was real." They didn't speak for a long time. Then Drolis said something he hadn't dared to before. "They're going to come for us." Yarak's jaw tensed. "Let them." Drolis shook his head. "Number not us. Them. The humans. They won't be attacked directly. It'll start subtle. Disinformation. Division. Isolation." "Then what do we do?" Drolis opened the datapad. It was a full schematic of the Institute's network systems, the ones still connected to external databases, every access point, every blind spot. "We get ahead of it." And they did. Over the next 10 days, students who once feared failing a thesis were now hacking into interstellar comms lines. Velkari linguists were decoding hidden messages between senators. Zaltians, masters of sensory warfare, were intercepting image-based propaganda designed to paint humans as unstable aggressors. And all of it was being exposed. Live. In real time. To the galaxy. The students of the Institute became something else entirely. The Archive Defense, not a military force, not a formal body, but a collective of truth. They didn't fight with weapons, they fought with evidence, but the pressure rose. A series of mysterious, unexplained failures began to strike other educational centers. Data loss, network crashes, bombings. All of them pointed back to a single culprit: Terran corruption. News networks, especially those in systems controlled by the Old Guard, started using subtle language changes. Human resurgence became human aggression. Terran culture became Terran threat. The Iron Debt became the Iron Cult. The war wasn't coming with guns. It was coming with narrative. In the Institute's war room, formerly the administration's conference hall, Cole pulled the strings tight. You thought you could reason with cowards who fear the truth. You didn't sell us out. You sold yourself. Drolis dropped the pad. I didn't mean to... Yarak didn't let him finish. You made your choice. Then he walked away. Tain followed. Drolis didn't try to stop them. He just sat in the dark and waited for a punishment that never came. That was the human way. Let you live long enough to feel it. Lorne gathered his command inside the shattered council chamber, now their war room. The council made their move, he said. We knew they would. Cole stood beside him, jaw tight. They want to shut us down before this becomes a movement they can't control. It's already too late for that, Yarak said. Students are fighting back in 5 other systems. The message is alive. That's not enough, Lorne said. They don't care about students. They care about power. He turned to the center of the table and tapped an ancient piece of hardware, a Terran relic known as a black pill. It wasn't a bomb. Not technically. It was worse. A knowledge device, illegal in most systems, containing 10,000 hours of unfiltered, unredacted human war archives, including footage, internal military logs, confessions, experimental breakdowns, and field tests the galaxy thought had been destroyed after the ban. Cole flinched. You're not serious, Lorne nodded. If they want to paint us as monsters, we show them what monsters really look like. You release that, Tain said slowly, and they'll never forgive us. Lorne's voice dropped. They already don't. The debate lasted hours. Some students begged Lorne not to go through with it. Others supported him. But in the end, the choice was his. He was the face now. The ghost returned. He waited until the 3rd night, when the stars were low and the Institute was quiet again. Then he broadcasted the black pill, not to inspire fear, to bury the lies once and for all. The galaxy was not prepared. They saw what humanity had done during its worst decades, not the noble, heroic missions, but the desperate ones, the war against the Flenser plague, the massacre on Titan 88 to stop a viral AI, the starvation siege Earth ran on its own moon to stop a rebel cell that had hijacked a nuclear satellite. No censorship, no moral spin, just the raw, blood-stained truth. And in the background of it all, a voice narrated the closing message. We did what we had to. We did it without your permission, and we'd do it again. If you fear us, good. That means you understand us. If you hate us, better. That means we matter. But if you try to erase us again, then we show you the side of humanity that created peace through hell. Choose wisely. The black pill broke the galaxy open. Some systems fell into panic. Others blocked Terran content completely. But many began to question the Council's silence. The way they had buried history, sanitized suffering, sold the myth of peace while hiding the cost of it. In the shadow sectors, graffiti began to appear on city walls and mining outposts. Fear the forgotten. Earth bleeds, but it never begs. You silenced the monsters. Now they teach your children. Back at the Institute, Lorne sat alone in the tower once reserved for the Council Chancellor. The students didn't talk to him now, not because they feared him, but because they understood. He wasn't their leader. He was their warning. Cole entered the room quietly. They've started calling it the Reckoning Stream. Lorne didn't respond. They'll come for you now, personally. Lorne turned his gaze toward the stars. Let them. Cole sat down beside him. Was it worth it? Lorne finally looked at him. No. He stood. But it was necessary. Below, in the garden where the rebellion began, Yarak knelt beside Tain and helped plant a new Terran tree, its leaves blood red, its roots genetically engineered to survive any soil. Tain wiped sweat from his brow. It'll take years to grow. Yarak looked up at the sky. Then we better protect it until it does. The war didn't begin with an invasion. It began with silence. After the black pill was released, the galaxy didn't immediately respond. No armies, no condemnations, no sanctions, just stillness. For 8 days, not a single system replied to Terran communications. Neutral planets closed their ports to Terran-linked vessels. Trade alliances suspended Earth-based contracts. News feeds simply skipped over Earth entirely. It was like they were trying to delete them again. But this time, the silence wasn't apathy. It was hesitation. Because the truth was out now, too big to contain, too vivid to ignore. And in the quiet, the galaxy was watching, waiting to see if Earth would become what they feared. Or something worse. Inside the Institute, the students had stopped calling it school. No more professors, no more class lists, no more tests. Now they called it the Bastion, a fortress of broken towers, flickering lights, and hybrid patrols made up of Terran volunteers and young aliens who had once worn lecture robes and now carried rifles and hand-forged blades. Tain walked the southern wall every morning. Not because he was assigned to, no one assigned anything anymore, but because it helped him think. That morning, as the horizon glowed a dim silver, he spotted a ship cutting through the atmosphere. No markings, no signal. "Visitor?" he called down to the guard deck. Cole was already halfway up the steps before the alarm could finish its first cycle. "Where's Lorne?" Tain asked. "Below," Cole said. "He's expecting them." The ship landed without permission. Terrans surrounded the perimeter before the doors even opened, weapons holstered but ready. The air thickened. No one breathed easy. Then the ramp lowered. Out walked 3 galactic counselors, one from Veltrax, one from the Rulkan Accord. And the last, an ancient, cloaked figure whose name was spoken only in history logs. Maran Vael, once the architect of the human ban. Lorne stepped forward alone, armor half-worn, dust on his boots, hands bare. Maran didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. Everyone around her could feel the weight of her presence, not through charisma or menace, but history. She was the symbol of everything Earth had been exiled for. And now she had come back. "You should have stayed gone," she said. Lorne didn't blink. "You should have told the truth." Her eyes narrowed. "You've destabilized the outer rings. You've created fear. You've made martyrs out of criminals." "You made ghosts out of heroes," Lorne replied. "I just turned the lights back on." The Rulkan counselor spoke. "Do you know how many systems are now reconsidering their alliance terms? How many are questioning the Council's authority? Your actions have thrown the Union into chaos." Lorne stepped closer. "Good. Authority built on lies deserves to burn." Marin's expression hardened. "We are not here to negotiate." Lorne smiled coldly. "Then leave." But she didn't. Instead, she held out a small black cube, a direct neural data burst. Ancient tech, impossible to fake. He took it. As the information flooded into his cortex, Lorne saw everything. A vote, a secret council, a final plan. Initiate Protocol Vengeance, a pre-approved operation designed decades ago, a fail-safe in case Earth ever regained its voice, massive fleet mobilization, orbital ion suppression, biological disruption drones, the kill switch. In less than 72 hours, the Bastion would be surrounded, cut off, sterilized. The Council had already approved it. Most of the outer systems had voted in silence, and now they'd come here to offer Lorne one final mercy: surrender or burn. Back in the war room, Cole slammed his fist on the console. "We fight. We don't even hesitate. Screw their vote. We've bled too long for this." Yurak stood quiet. He'd lost 3 friends during the last data raid. One of them hadn't even learned how to use a weapon yet. "Fighting them gives them what they want," he said finally. "They want us to become monsters." Tane countered, "They've already decided we are." "So what's the difference?" Everyone turned to Lorne. He stood with the cube in his hand, staring out at the gathering clouds on the edge of the Institute's gravity field. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, "We don't surrender." Cole nodded. "We don't provoke." That caught them off guard. "What are you saying?" Tane asked. "I'm saying we show them what restraint looks like," Lorne replied. "We let them come. We let them see what it takes to destroy people who already stood up from the ashes once." He turned back toward them. "And when they fire the first shot, we make sure the whole galaxy knows who lit the match." The next 2 days were spent preparing. Not for victory, for survival, and for clarity. The students armed themselves, not with rockets, but with body cams and feed relays. Every hallway of the Institute was wired to stream globally, uncensored, even the mess halls and medical wings. When the Council's fleets came, there would be no confusion. They wouldn't be destroying warriors. They'd be crushing the truth. And that was the point. Day 72 since the footage went public. The Council's fleet arrived. 12 ships, 4 orbitals, 1 dreadnought. They didn't hail. They didn't broadcast. They just hovered, waiting, watching. Tension strangled the Institute. In the command deck, Lorne stood beside Tane, who now looked less like a student and more like a soldier from a world he'd never been born into. "They're waiting for us to blink," Tane said. "We don't," Lorne replied. Yurak walked in. "They're jamming off world comms. We're sealed." Lorne didn't panic. He looked to Cole. "Activate Legacy Stream." Cole hit the switch. In real time, every camera, every feed, every mic began pushing data through micro-relays across thousands of dormant comm buoys Earth had buried years ago, too small to notice, too deep to trace. The galaxy began watching again, in full view, live, and the first shot fired from the Council's lead cruiser ripped through the Institute's outer wall. Then came the orbital shells. The sky caught fire, and Lorne whispered, "Let them see us burn." They didn't fight back at first, just rescued, just shielded, just endured. Every bloodied face was streamed, every cry for help, every scream. It wasn't a battle, it was a broadcast. And within 4 hours, 5 systems broke alliance with the Council. Within 6, 30 planetary leaders issued demands for ceasefire. By the 10th hour, the Rulkan Accord collapsed. And by midnight, the Council's own soldiers began defecting. When the final cruiser lowered its guns, the Bastion stood half-broken, still glowing with emergency lights and streaming cables. Lorne walked through the wreckage, broken shoulder wrapped in Terran cloth, ribs cracked, vision blurry. But he was still standing. And the galaxy? Awake. Moran Vale didn't speak when she watched the footage. She just sat in her quarters, wrapped in silence, the screams and flames playing on loop, until one aide finally asked, "What should we do now?" Moran said nothing for a long time. Then, "Survive. The humans will." Back on Earth, a new signal lit the sky. Not a threat, not a broadcast, an invitation. "The Bastion welcomes all who dare to remember." And slowly, from every corner of the galaxy, They came.